The holographic displays of the Galactic High Council chamber shimmered with data streams and translation matrices. Suspended in orbit around a violet gas giant known as Krell 9, the massive station represented the pinnacle of interstellar diplomacy. 13 distinct species had, over millennia, forged a tenuous peace amid the chaos of competing evolutionary paths and conflicting biological imperatives. Commander Jack Ironjaw Briggs stood motionless at the center of the chamber, his weathered face betraying nothing as alien eyes scrutinized him from all sides. 6 feet, 2 inches of hardened muscle. Jack was the epitome of human military excellence, a Navy SEAL with 15 years of combat experience across Earth's most unforgiving battlefields. The scar that ran from his left temple to the edge of his jaw had earned him his nickname, a badge of honor from a classified operation in Yemen. Now, inexplicably, he had become humanity's unwitting ambassador, following his abduction through what scientists on the Council called a probability wormhole, a cosmic accident that had plucked him from a training exercise in the Arctic Circle and deposited him here, 600 light-years from Earth. The specimen continues to demonstrate remarkable physiological resilience, announced a tall, willowy figure to Jack's right. Dr. Cale Click was a xenopsychologist assigned to study the human, with translucent blue skin and oversized eyes that seemed perpetually wide with nervousness. Click had been the only entity to treat Jack with anything resembling compassion during his 3-week captivity. Subject maintains resting heart rate despite clear stress indicators. Click continued, addressing the semicircle of council representatives, suggesting advanced autonomic control unusual for species at their technological development stage. Jack remained silent. His SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape had prepared him for capture scenarios, though admittedly not for extraterrestrial ones. He'd been stripped of his tactical gear, left wearing only his combat pants and a tight-fitting undershirt that revealed the coiled strength of his shoulders and arms. The room's artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth's, but he'd adapted quickly, refusing to show weakness. High Counselor Vex, a vaguely reptilian being with iridescent scales and multiple sensory appendages, leaned forward from the central podium. The discovery of this planet, Earth, as the specimen calls it, represents a significant anomaly. Its inhabitants have achieved nuclear capabilities and primitive space travel without any uplift protocol guidance. The question before this council is clear: do we initiate contact, quarantine, or implement Omega Protocol? Jack knew enough to understand the stakes. He'd gleaned from Click's explanations that Omega Protocol was essentially a death sentence, not just for him, but potentially for his entire planet. The Council viewed unaligned civilizations as unpredictable threats to galactic stability. "I recommend immediate Omega implementation," declared General Horvath, a bulky Zarnari warrior whose species was renowned for their military prowess. "Their technological progression curve is dangerously steep. Historical records show they advanced from primitive flight to nuclear weapons in less than 50 Earth rotations." "That seems unnecessarily harsh," countered Senator Glarian, an entity composed of luminous energy contained within an environmental suit. "We have protocols for first contact scenarios. The ethical implications of erasure without—" "Ethics?" Horvath's guttural translator struggled with his barking laugh. "We've monitored their global communications. They spend more resources on weaponry than on hunger relief. They poison their own atmosphere. They're savages with fusion technology, the most dangerous combination in the galaxy." Jack's jaw clenched slightly, but he maintained his stoic expression. The warrior wasn't entirely wrong about humanity's flaws, but there was more to the story than resource allocation statistics. A slender Zarn soldier, clearly one of Horvath's subordinates, stepped forward. "High Council, perhaps a demonstration of the specimen's temperament would be informative. With your permission?" Vex nodded, appendages waving in what Jack had come to recognize as their equivalent of curiosity. The Zarn approached Jack, circling him like a predator. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with a chitinous exoskeleton and 4 upper limbs. The soldier was an intimidating sight. Jack tracked him with peripheral vision, cataloging potential weak points, joint articulations, exposed sensory organs, thinner plating at the neck. "Your species protocols," the Zarn said through his translator, voice dripping with contempt. "Do they include proper deference to superior forces?" Jack remained silent, eyes fixed forward. Click shifted uncomfortably beside him. "The Council addresses you, Earth Thing," the soldier continued, moving to stand directly in front of Jack. "Primitive courtesy demands a response." Jack met the alien's compound eyes, but said nothing. Seer protocol, name, rank, serial number only. And even those were on a need-to-know basis that these beings hadn't earned. Without warning, the Zarn's upper right limb lashed out, striking Jack across the face with an open-palm slap that would have sent most beings sprawling. Jack's head snapped sideways from the impact, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. The chamber fell silent. Click gasped. Jack slowly turned his head back, eyes locking with the Zarn's. Time seemed to compress. 2 seconds was all it took. In one fluid motion born from thousands of hours of close-quarters combat training, Jack pivoted, using the Zarn's own momentum against him. His right hand shot up, fingers rigid, targeting the thin connection between the alien's head and thorax. His left hand simultaneously grabbed the creature's upper arm, creating the leverage point for what came next. The sound was unmistakable, a sickening crack that echoed through the council chamber as the Zarn's skull fractured under the precision strike. Green ichor sprayed from the wound as the soldier collapsed, twitching spasmodically on the polished floor. Before anyone could react, Jack had resumed his original position, standing at parade rest as if nothing had happened. Only the splatter of alien blood on his shirt and the dangerous gleam in his eyes indicated otherwise. Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Security drones descended from hidden compartments in the ceiling. Horvath roared in fury, while other representatives recoiled in horror. Vex's appendages flailed in what could only be alarm. "Containment protocol!" someone shouted. "Initiate stasis field!" A shimmering energy barrier materialized around Jack, who made no attempt to resist. He had made his point. If these beings thought humans were easy prey, he'd given them something to reconsider. Click stared at him, those oversized eyes now impossibly wider. "What have you done?" the xenopsychologist whispered. Jack finally broke his silence, voice low and calm. "On Earth, we call that self-defense." The violet light of the gas giant filtered through the chamber's viewing ports, casting everything in an alien glow as guards rushed to remove the fallen Zarn. Jack Briggs had just upended interstellar diplomacy with a single, lethal movement, and humanity's fate now hung in the balance. The quantum stasis cell hummed with energy, creating a barely perceptible distortion in the air around Jack. He sat motionless on the minimalist platform that served as both bed and chair, his back straight, eyes forward, monitoring the subtle fluctuations in the containment field. 72 hours had passed since the incident in the council chamber, and this was the first time he'd been left truly alone. He flexed his right hand, recalling the sensation of the Zarn's exoskeleton giving way beneath his strike. No remorse. The alien had attacked first, and Jack had responded with precisely the force necessary to neutralize the threat. That the force had proved lethal was a miscalculation based on insufficient data about Zarn physiology, not an act of malice. "Survival isn't pretty," he murmured to himself, a mantra from his first commanding officer. The cell door shimmered, its molecular structure rearranging to allow entry while maintaining the integrity of the containment field. Dr. Cale Click stepped through, carrying what appeared to be a data tablet. The xenopsychologist's movements were more agitated than usual, blue skin fluctuating in tone, a physiological tell that Jack had come to recognize as extreme stress. "Commander Briggs," Click said, using the human's rank for the first time since his capture. "The situation has deteriorated significantly." Jack nodded once, inviting elaboration without wasting words. "General Horvath has called for immediate implementation of Omega Protocol, not just for you, but for your entire planet." Click's large eyes blinked rapidly. "The death of Subcommander Zavik has been broadcast across the galactic network. Public sentiment is not favorable." "I defended myself," Jack stated flatly. "By Council standards, you committed an act of barbarism." Click's voice dropped lower. "The Zarn never expected retaliation. In their culture, ceremonial submission displays are standard protocol. Your response was unprecedented." Jack's eyes hardened. "Where I come from, you don't put your hands on another man unless you're prepared for the consequences." A flash of memory. Rain-soaked jungle. The coppery smell of blood. A younger Jack kneeling beside a fallen teammate in Vietnam. Lieutenant Ramirez gasping his final words. "Don't let them see you break. Iron Jaw. That's when they win." Jack blinked the image away. The trauma implant they'd given him during SEAL training sometimes triggered flashbacks at moments of peak stress. A neural enhancement designed to access combat experiences when needed most. Sometimes useful, always painful. Click placed the tablet on the platform beside Jack. "I've been advocating for leniency, but I need to understand you better if I'm going to help. The Council has granted me limited permission to continue our sessions." Jack studied the xenopsychologist. Click was frightened but determined, a potential ally in this impossible situation. "What do you need to know?" "Why did you kill him?" Click asked directly. "You could have incapacitated Subcommander Zavik. Your physical capabilities clearly exceed Zarn parameters." Jack considered his response carefully. "In combat situations, hesitation gets you killed. You neutralize the threat decisively, then assess." "I didn't know if he had backup ready to engage or hidden weapons. I made a tactical decision based on limited intelligence and an imminent threat." Click's skin rippled with what Jack had learned was their equivalent of a shudder. "The Council sees only savagery in such reasoning. Then they understand nothing about survival," Jack replied evenly. "Humanity hasn't thrived for thousands of years by being gentle with those who threaten us." A distant alarm sounded, causing Click to startle. "The Council reconvenes in 3 hours to vote on Earth's fate. Senator Glarian has been arguing for further study, but General Horvath's faction holds significant influence." Jack nodded toward the cell's boundaries. "These quantum fields, they fluctuate on a regular cycle." Click blinked in surprise. "Yes, they require recalibration every 6 hours due to subatomic decay. Standard procedure for high-security containment. Why do you ask?" "Just curious about my accommodations," Jack replied, face neutral. But his mind was already calculating intervals, mapping guard rotations he'd observed, cataloging the station's layout from what he'd seen during his transfer to the detention block. Click wasn't fooled. "Escape is impossible, Commander. This facility orbits a gas giant with no habitable surfaces. Even if you could break containment, there's nowhere to go." Jack offered the faintest smile. "There's always somewhere to go, Doctor. That's another human trait your Council might want to study." The xenopsychologist appeared troubled. "I should inform you. The Council has authorized enhanced interrogation methods if you refuse to cooperate fully. They want to understand Earth's defensive capabilities, governmental structures, and potential threats." Jack's expression didn't change, but internally, he prepared himself for what was coming. He'd undergone SEER Level C training, the military's most intensive resistance program. Whatever these aliens had planned, he'd endured worse at the hands of human instructors. "One last thing," Click added, lowering their voice. "Not everyone on the Council supports Omega Protocol. Senator Glarian has been particularly vocal about the ethical implications. There are factions forming, political division, potential leverage. Jack filed this information away. Another piece in the evolving strategy taking shape in his mind. "Tell me about these interrogation methods," Jack said. Click's skin darkened anxiously. "They use a telepathic probe, a biomechanical orb that interfaces directly with neural pathways. It's unpleasant, but not usually lethal." Jack nodded. "I appreciate the warning, Doctor." As Click turned to leave, Jack spoke again. "Why are you helping me?" The xenopsychologist paused at the threshold. "Because in all my years studying sentient species, I've never encountered one that could shatter a Zarn warrior's skull with their bare hands. You're either the most dangerous being we've ever contained," Click's large eyes fixed on Jack, "or the most remarkable. I'm not certain which possibility frightens General Horvath more." After Click departed, Jack resumed his meditative stillness, conserving energy while his mind worked. The stasis field's subtle patterns were becoming clearer now, microsecond fluctuations that might provide an opportunity. The guards changed shifts at regular intervals, and somewhere in this facility, decisions were being made about Earth's fate. Jack Briggs had never been one for politics or diplomacy, but he'd be damned if he'd sit idle while some alien council decided whether his planet deserved to exist. One way or another, he was getting out of this cell. "Hang in there, Earth," he whispered. "Your junkyard dog is working on it." The interrogation chamber was a stark contrast to the ornate council room, utilitarian, efficient, and devoid of aesthetic considerations. Three beings stood behind a curved console facing Jack, who was secured to an inclined platform by energy restraints that hummed against his skin. The platform had been calibrated to human physiology, supporting his body while leaving him completely immobilized. The interrogator triad, as Click had called them, consisted of a Zarn scientist, a bipedal entity with crystalline features, and a hovering mass of tentacles surrounding a central neural cluster. All three wore identical silver uniforms bearing the Galactic Council insignia. "The procedure is straightforward," the crystalline being explained, voice resonating like struck glass. "The neural orb will interface with your consciousness. Resistance is physiologically taxing and ultimately futile." Jack remained silent, focusing on his breathing. In his mind, he recited a string of meaningless numbers, a mental technique taught during resistance training to compartmentalize thoughts and create a buffer against interrogation. The Zarn scientist manipulated controls on the console, and a hovering sphere approximately the size of a baseball emerged from a ceiling compartment. The orb pulsed with bioluminescent energy, shifting through colors as it descended toward Jack's head. "We will begin with basic neural mapping," the tentacled being gurgled through its translator. "Then, proceed to memory extraction regarding Earth's defensive capabilities." Jack fixed his gaze on the approaching orb, continuing his internal number sequence, 35-82971. The sphere made contact with his forehead, and Jack's world exploded into white-hot pain. It felt like thousands of microscopic filaments burrowing into his brain, seeking pathways to his memories. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced. Worse than the time he'd been caught in an IED blast in Fallujah. More invasive than the waterboarding sessions during SEER training. Images flashed through his consciousness. Submarine deployment off North Korea. Tactical briefing at Coronado. Childhood fishing trips on Lake Superior. His first kill during a counterterrorism operation. Jack gritted his teeth, focusing on his mental firewall. The numbers became his anchor in the storm of neural invasion. 35-82971. He visualized each digit, making them larger, brighter, drowning out the memories the orb was attempting to extract. "Fascinating," the crystalline being observed. "The subject is employing some form of cognitive resistance technique." "Increase integration parameters," the Zarn scientist instructed, The pain intensified. Jack felt blood trickling from his nose, but he maintained his focus. Years of specialized training had prepared him for this. Not alien telepathic probes specifically, but the principle remained the same. The mind could be conditioned to withstand extreme duress. Now Jack shifted tactics, allowing certain memories to surface, deliberately selected ones that revealed nothing of strategic value. Boot camp, ocean training exercises. The time his unit had built a makeshift basketball court at a forward operating base in Afghanistan. "We're receiving fragmented data," the tentacled entity reported. "Mostly personal memories, non-tactical in nature." The Zarn made an adjustment, and the orb pulsed brighter. "Deepening neural penetration." Jack's body went rigid as the probe pushed harder. The numbers began to slip away, replaced by more recent memories. His capture, the council chamber, the moment he had killed the Zarn soldier. Then, something unexpected happened. As the orb extracted the memory of the lethal strike, Jack experienced the moment again in perfect detail. The precise angle of his hand, the exact pressure point he'd targeted, the specific leverage he'd applied. The muscle memory triggered something within him, a sudden understanding of the neural orb's intrusive pattern. It was reaching into his mind, but the connection worked both ways. With intense concentration, Jack directed his consciousness along the filaments connecting him to the orb. Instead of resisting the pull, he pushed back, channeling the iron will that had carried him through the most grueling military training on Earth. The orb's pulsing became erratic. Its colors shifted rapidly, cycling through patterns that grew increasingly chaotic. "What's happening?" the crystalline being demanded. "The interface is destabilizing." "Impossible," the Zarn scientist responded, fingers working frantically across the console. "No subject has ever reversed the neural flow. The orb's safeguard should prevent—" With a sound like shattering glass, the neural orb cracked. Luminescent fluid leaked from the fissures, dripping onto Jack's face as the sphere's light dimmed and flickered. A moment later, the orb exploded into fragments, showering the chamber with bioluminescent debris. Silence fell. The three interrogators stared in disbelief at the human strapped to the platform, blood streaming from his nose, eyes burning with defiance. "That," Jack said hoarsely, breaking his long silence, "is how we handle invasions on Earth?" The tentacled being retreated slightly. "This was a Class 7 neural probe. It has successfully extracted information from 43 distinct species." "Make that 42, Jack replied, allowing himself a grim smile despite the pounding headache, now threatening to split his skull. The crystalline entity turned to its colleagues. "The council must be informed. This level of mental fortitude was unanticipated." "It changes nothing," the Zarn scientist insisted. "One anomalous individual doesn't alter the threat assessment for the entire species." But Jack could see the uncertainty in their body language. He had just demonstrated that humans possessed capabilities these beings hadn't accounted for in their calculations. As they deactivated the energy restraints and summoned guards to return him to his cell, Jack realized something profound had shifted. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He had become a living testament to humanity's resilience, their capacity to resist, to push back against overwhelming odds. What the Galactic Council didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Jack Briggs was far from the most formidable example of his species. He was simply one of many humans who had been forged in the crucible of Earth's harshest challenges. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving the unsurvivable. "The public broadcast begins in 5 minutes, Dr. Click announced, entering Jack's cell with unusual urgency. "The Council has decided to transmit the interrogation footage throughout the galactic network." Jack sat up from his meditative position. The neural probe had left him with a persistent migraine, but he'd managed to enter a recovery trance taught by the SEAL team's combat medic, focusing his body's resources on healing while maintaining situational awareness. "Let me guess," Jack said, voice still rough. They're hoping to scare the citizenry with the dangerous Earth monster. Click's skin rippled with agitation. It's worse than that. General Horvath is using your resistance to the neural probe as evidence that humans are too dangerous to be permitted continued existence. He's calling Earth an evolutionary aberration that must be corrected. Jack absorbed this, his expression hardening. And Senator Glarian's faction? They're losing ground. The imagery of you destroying the neural orb has been impactful. Click moved closer, lowering their voice despite the surveillance, certainly monitoring the cell. The Council has scheduled a final vote on Omega Protocol in 72 hours. 72 hours to save an entire planet. Jack had operated under tighter deadlines, but the stakes had never been quite this high. What exactly does this Omega Protocol entail? He asked. Click hesitated before answering. It's a comprehensive erasure, a targeted dimensional fold that removes not just the physical planet, but all causal echoes of its existence from the universal matrix. Jack stared. You're talking about erasing Earth from reality itself. Yes. Click's large eyes seemed to dim. It's been implemented only twice in the Council's history, both times against civilizations that developed weaponized dimensional manipulation. The technology is absolute. Jack processed this information, a cold fury building within him. These beings, these self-appointed cosmic arbiters, had decided they could simply erase his world, his people, the entire history of human civilization because they found it inconvenient or frightening. The broadcast is beginning, Click said, activating a holographic display that materialized in the center of the cell. The image showed the council chamber, now arranged as a public forum. Representatives from all 13 member species were present, with General Horvath standing at the central podium. Behind him, a massive display showed footage from Jack's interrogation, the moment when the neural orb shattered under the force of his will. Behold the threat we face, Horvath's translator boomed. This single specimen from the planet designated Earth possesses mental capabilities that overwhelmed our most advanced neural technology. Their physical prowess has already been demonstrated with the tragic death of Sub-Commander Zavik. The display shifted to show a montage of images extracted from Jack's memories before he had managed to block the probe. Scenes of warfare from Earth's history. Tanks rolling across desert landscapes. Nuclear test footage. Urban combat in nameless cities. Their history is one of unrelenting violence, Horvath continued. They have weaponized every scientific discovery. They've poisoned their own biosphere. They wage war over resources, ideology, and territory with a ferocity that would destabilize our entire sector if allowed to spread. Jack watched impassively as his species' worst moments were paraded before an audience of trillions across countless worlds. The images weren't wrong, exactly. Humanity had a long history of bloodshed and destruction, but they told only part of the story. The broadcast continued with scientific analyses of human physiology, psychological evaluations based on Jack's responses, and strategic assessments of Earth's potential threat level if permitted to develop interstellar technology. Then, unexpectedly, the feed cut to Senator Glarian, the luminous energy of their form pulsing with intensity. Esteemed colleagues, Glarian began, I urge caution before we commit to an irreversible course of action. The Omega Protocol was established for civilizations that posed an immediate existential threat to galactic stability. Earth remains isolated, unaware of our existence, confined to their solar system. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Furthermore, Glarian continued, our assessment is based on a single specimen taken against his will, thrust into an alien environment, and subjected to what he could only perceive as hostile interrogation. Is it surprising he responded defensively? The display split to show Jack in his cell, watching the proceedings. He maintained a stoic expression, aware that his every reaction was being scrutinized by billions of alien observers. I propose an alternative, Glarian said. A dedicated study mission, controlled observation, cultural exchange with appropriate safeguards. We may find that humans possess qualities worthy of preservation despite their volatility. Horvath's appendages quivered, with barely contained rage. Senator Glarian demonstrates the dangerous naivety that has led to previous security breaches. The specimen has already demonstrated lethal capabilities. The neural probe extraction revealed their species is rapidly advancing toward dimensional manipulation technology. The timeline for preventative action is closing. The council chairperson, a being Jack hadn't seen before, composed of what appeared to be metallic filaments, arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape, raised an appendage for silence. The arguments have been presented. In accordance with Galactic Charter protocols, a 72-hour deliberation period will commence. At its conclusion, a binding vote will determine Earth's designation, contact, quarantine, or Omega. The broadcast continued with technical discussions and further analysis. But Jack had heard enough. He turned to Click, who had been watching his reactions carefully. "The quantum stasis field," Jack said quietly. "The fluctuation cycle you mentioned. When is the next recalibration scheduled?" Click's skin darkened with alarm. "Commander, I told you. Escape is impossible. The station's security protocols." "When?" Jack insisted. The xenopsychologist hesitated before answering. "The next cycle completes in approximately 7 hours. But even if you could somehow bypass the field during recalibration, you would face automated security systems, armed guards, and no viable exit path." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "What about you, Doctor? Where do you stand on this Omega protocol?" Click seemed surprised by the question. "I'm a xenopsychologist. My role is to study and understand, not to judge." "That's not an answer," Jack pressed. "You've spent more time with me than anyone else here. You've seen inside my mind. Do you believe Earth deserves to be erased from existence?" The alien's large eyes fixed on Jack, internal bioluminescence flickering with what might have been emotion. "I believe that judgment of an entire species based on limited interaction is the height of scientific irresponsibility." It wasn't exactly a declaration of alliance, but it was enough for Jack to work with. "I need your help, Doctor." "I cannot assist in any escape attempt," Click responded immediately. "The ethical and professional implications—" "I'm not asking you to break me out," Jack interrupted. "I'll handle that part myself. But I need information, station layouts, guard rotations, communication protocols, the location of any Earth artifacts they might have collected when they took me." Click's skin rippled with conflict. "Why would I provide such information?" Jack leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Because somewhere deep down, you know this isn't right. Because you're a scientist, and scientists are supposed to protect knowledge, not destroy it. Earth may be messy and violent and chaotic, but it's also home to billions of innocent lives, children who've never held a weapon, artists who create beauty from nothing, researchers working to cure diseases and heal our planet's wounds." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "And because if the Council can casually erase one world today, they might decide to erase another tomorrow. Maybe one you care about." The xenopsychologist remained silent for a long moment, those oversized eyes unblinking as they studied Jack. Finally, Click reached into a pocket of their environmental suit and removed what appeared to be a small data chip. "This contains basic navigational schematics for the detention block," Click said quietly, placing it on the platform beside Jack. "For my research purposes, of course. To better understand your spatial perception capabilities." Jack didn't move to take it, aware of the surveillance. "Of course, Doctor. I'd be happy to participate in your research." As Click turned to leave, the xenopsychologist paused. "One more thing you should know, Commander. Your equipment, the items you were carrying when you were intercepted, they're being held in the Xeno Artifact Repository on Level 7. for study purposes. Jack nodded almost imperceptibly. His combat gear, communications equipment, and, most importantly, his weapons would be there. "Thank you for the continued cultural exchange, Doctor," he said formally. "It's been most educational." After Click departed, Jack returned to his meditative position, mentally reviewing what he'd learned from the data chip while appearing to rest. The station's layout was complex but navigable. Security was concentrated at key junctions, with automated systems filling the gaps between guard posts. 72 hours until Earth's fate was decided. 7 hours until the next stasis field recalibration. One chance to get it right. Jack Briggs had never failed a mission. He wasn't about to start now, not with his entire planet hanging in the balance. The quantum stasis field flickered almost imperceptibly as it entered its recalibration sequence. To most observers, the barely visible energy barrier would appear unchanged. But Jack had been studying its patterns for hours, noting the microsecond variations that signaled the system's vulnerable points. He lay motionless on the platform, eyes closed, breathing steady, the picture of a resigned prisoner. But beneath this facade of submission, every muscle in his body was coiled and ready. 3, 2, 1. The field reached its minimum integrity point during the automated diagnostic. Jack moved with explosive speed, rolling from the platform and hurling himself at the precise spot where the energy matrix was thinnest. His body crashed against what felt like thick gelatin, the quantum particles struggling to maintain cohesion against his momentum. For a heartbeat, he feared he had miscalculated. Then the field gave way, and he tumbled into the corridor beyond his cell. The alarm was immediate, wailing through the detention block with strident urgency. Jack didn't waste a millisecond. Using the mental map he'd constructed from Click's data, he sprinted toward the maintenance access junction 20 meters ahead. 2 guard drones rounded the corner, spherical bodies bristling with what he assumed were weapons. Jack didn't slow down. He accelerated directly toward them, ducking at the last possible moment as they fired. Energy pulses sizzled through the air where his head had been a split second earlier. Jack slid beneath the drones, reaching up to grab one and slam it into the other with devastating force. Both machines crashed to the floor in a shower of sparks and component debris. The maintenance junction was sealed with a biometric lock. Jack had anticipated this. He grabbed one of the damaged drones, ripping off its sensor array and pressing it against the scanning plate. The lock hesitated, then clicked open, the drone's security clearance overriding the lockdown protocol. He slipped inside, just as the corridor filled with security personnel. The maintenance shaft was narrow and dimly lit, designed for repair automatons rather than humanoid maintenance workers. Jack moved through it with practiced efficiency, recalling similar infiltration paths from countless operations on Earth. According to the schematics, the shaft would lead him to a secondary power distribution hub that connected to all major levels. From there, he could access Level 7 where his equipment was stored. As he navigated the labyrinthine passages, Jack's mind remained focused and clear. Fear, doubt, fatigue. These were luxuries he couldn't afford. The mission parameters were simple: retrieve his gear, disable the Omega Protocol countdown, and find a way to communicate with Earth. Everything else was secondary. The power distribution hub hummed with energy as Jack emerged from the maintenance shaft. Massive conduits carried whatever exotic power source fueled the station, their translucent casings pulsing with colors he had no names for. A startled technician, a small insectoid being with multiple appendages, looked up from a control panel. Before the alien could react, Jack was upon it, applying precisely enough pressure to a nerve cluster near its thorax to render it unconscious without causing permanent damage. He lowered the technician gently to the floor. "Nothing personal," he muttered, appropriating the being's access badge and technical toolkit. The station-wide alert continued. But here in the infrastructure sections, the response seemed less frantic. Jack used the technician's badge to access a data terminal, pulling up a current security deployment map. As he had hoped, most forces were concentrated around the detention block and primary transportation hubs. With the toolkit slung over his shoulder and the badge displayed prominently on his chest, Jack stepped confidently into a service elevator. He input level 7, maintaining the bearing of someone with every right to be there, a technique that had served him well in countless infiltration missions. Even in an alien facility, body language conveyed authority across species barriers. The elevator hummed softly as it ascended through the station's levels. Jack used the brief respite to center himself, controlling his breathing and preparing for the next phase. The Xeno artifact repository would likely have its own security measures, but if he could reach his equipment, particularly his sidearm and combat knife, his options would expand considerably. The doors slid open to reveal a sterile white corridor, lined with transparent display cases. Each contained objects from various worlds, artifacts of civilizations under study by the Council. Jack stepped out cautiously, scanning for guards or automated systems. The repository appeared deserted, likely because security resources were focused on finding him elsewhere. He moved quickly past displays containing items he couldn't begin to comprehend, devices and artifacts from across the galaxy. Then he saw it. A familiar case containing Earth equipment, his tactical vest, combat boots, communications gear, and weapons were arranged in a clinical display, labeled with alien script. The case was sealed with an energy field similar to his cell's containment system. Jack examined the control panel beside the display. Unlike the stasis field, this was a simple preservation barrier designed to maintain atmospheric conditions rather than restrain dangerous contents. He used the technician's toolkit to bypass the security circuit, redirecting power from the primary feed to the auxiliary system. The field wavered, then disappeared. Without hesitation, Jack retrieved his gear, quickly donning the tactical vest and securing his weapons. The familiar weight of his M4 carbine in his hands sent a surge of confidence through him. He checked the magazine, full combat load, just as it had been when he was abducted. "Hello, beautiful," he whispered to the rifle, running a practiced hand along its contours. The weapon represented more than firepower. It was a symbol of his identity, his training, his world. As he finished gearing up, a soft voice spoke from behind him. "I calculated a 6.3% probability you would make it this far." Jack spun, rifle raised, to find Dr. Click standing in the repository entrance. The xenopsychologist's hands were raised in a universal gesture of non-aggression. "That's oddly specific," Jack replied, not lowering his weapon. "I'm a scientist. Precision matters." Click's large eyes darted to the rifle, then back to Jack's face. "The Omega Protocol countdown has been initiated. General Horvath convinced enough council members to bypass the waiting period. You have less than 2 hours before the dimensional fold begins." Jack processed this information, adjusting his plans accordingly. "Where's the control center? Where do I stop this?" "The primary relay tower at the station's apex controls the dimensional fold apparatus." Click's skin fluctuated, with what Jack had come to recognize as extreme anxiety. "But it's impossible to reach. The security presence." "I don't deal in impossible, Doctor," Jack cut in. "Just varying degrees of difficulty." He lowered his rifle slightly. "Are you here to stop me?" Click seemed almost offended by the suggestion. "I'm a xenopsychologist, not a security officer. My interest is in understanding, not enforcement." "Understanding what exactly?" "Why you continue to fight when statistical probability indicates certain failure." Click's head tilted curiously. "It's not rational behavior." Jack allowed himself a grim smile. "Humans aren't always big on rationality, Doctor. Sometimes we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Where's the nearest access point to reach this relay tower?" Click hesitated only briefly before answering. Maintenance shaft 9 Alpha. 3 junctions east of this position. It connects to the central lift system that services the upper levels. Jack nodded. Thank you. As he moved to leave, Click spoke again. Commander Briggs, I've been authorized to offer you a personal exemption. If you surrender now, the Council will extract you from the causal matrix before implementing Omega Protocol. You alone would survive Earth's erasure. Jack stopped, turning slowly to face the xenopsychologist. His expression was carved from stone, eyes cold as Arctic ice. Is that what you think of me, Doctor? That I'd accept my own survival while billions of innocent people, my people, are wiped from existence? Click's skin darkened with what might have been embarrassment. I am required to present all sanctioned options. Then, here's my answer, Jack said, voice steady. As long as I'm breathing, no one's erasing my planet, and anyone who tries is going to learn exactly why you don't corner a species that clawed its way to the top of a predator-filled food chain. Without waiting for a response, Jack moved swiftly toward the exit, leaving the xenopsychologist staring after him with those impossibly large, troubled eyes. As he navigated through the station's service corridors, Jack activated his tactical radio, scanning frequencies. It was a long shot, but if there was any communication system compatible with Earth technology, he might be able to establish contact. Static filled his earpiece, punctuated by alien transmissions his equipment couldn't decode. Then, faintly, he detected something unexpected, a carrier wave using protocols similar to deep space NASA transmissions. The Council had been monitoring Earth's communications. Perhaps they'd adapted some of their systems to human frequencies for research purposes. It wasn't much, but it was a starting point. If he could reach the relay tower and access its transmission array, he might be able to send a warning to Earth. Even if the message was garbled or incomplete, it would alert his planet that something was coming. 2 hours to prevent an entire world's erasure from reality. Jack checked his weapons, squared his shoulders, and moved with purpose toward Maintenance Shaft 9 Alpha. Just another day at the office, he muttered to himself, disappearing into the shadows of the alien station's infrastructure. The central lift system was heavily guarded, just as Click had warned. 6 Zarn security officers and a dozen automated drones monitored the access point to the upper levels, their vigilance heightened by the station-wide alert. Jack observed them from a concealed position in the ventilation system, calculating odds and options. A frontal assault would be suicide, even with his superior combat training and Earth weapons. The numbers were prohibitive. He needed a diversion. His gaze fell on the power conduits running along the corridor ceiling. Each carried different energy signatures for various station systems: life support, gravity regulation, communication networks. If he could identify the right one, Jack reached into his tactical vest and removed a small block of C4 explosive, standard issue for his mission loadout. It wasn't much, but properly placed, it would create the chaos he needed. He crawled backward through the ventilation shaft until he reached a junction connecting to an adjacent corridor. Dropping silently to the floor, he moved to a secondary power distribution panel and began cross-referencing what he'd learned about the station's systems. The alien technology was advanced, but engineering principles remained consistent across species. Power had to flow. Systems had to communicate. Critical functions had to be protected with redundancies. After a few minutes of careful study, Jack identified the conduit controlling environmental systems for the detention level, non-essential enough that damaging it wouldn't endanger lives, but significant enough to demand immediate response. He placed the C4 charge, set a 5-minute timer, and retreated to a strategic position near the central lift. As he waited, Jack checked his equipment one final time. M4 rifle with 2 full magazines, sidearm with 1 spare clip, combat knife, tactical radio still scanning for usable frequencies, everything in order. The explosion, when it came, was more spectacular than he'd anticipated. The power conduit didn't just break. It ruptured in a cascade of exotic energy that created a localized gravitational distortion. Alarms blared throughout the station as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly in the affected section. The security team responded exactly as Jack had predicted. 4 of the 6 guards and most of the drones rushed toward the disturbance, leaving minimal coverage at the lift. Jack didn't hesitate. He emerged from cover and approached the remaining guards with purposeful strides, wearing the confiscated technician's badge prominently and carrying his rifle at a non-threatening angle. "Emergency Protocol 7-3, he barked in a commanding tone, gesturing toward the explosion site. "Upper-level containment team required." The guards hesitated, compound eyes studying him suspiciously. One raised a limb toward a communication device. Jack had counted on this moment of uncertainty. Before either guard could react further, he dropped into a combat stance and fired 2 precisely aimed shots. The rifle's report echoed through the corridor as both Zarn collapsed, green ichor spreading beneath their chitinous bodies. The remaining drones activated attack protocols, energy weapons powering up with an ominous hum. Jack rolled behind a structural column as the first volley sizzled past him. He counted the firing pattern, 3-second intervals between energy pulses, predictable targeting algorithms. When the next volley ended, he pivoted around the column and fired in rapid succession, his SEAL training evident in the economy of motion and unerring accuracy. Each shot found a critical system on the hovering drones, sending them crashing to the floor in showers of sparks. The lift access was clear, but Jack knew his window was closing rapidly. He sprinted forward, using the dead guard's appendage to activate the biometric scanner. The lift doors slid open, and he stepped inside, selecting the highest accessible level. As the lift ascended, Jack allowed himself a moment to check the wound he'd sustained during the firefight. An energy weapon grazed along his left bicep that had burned through his sleeve and seared the skin beneath. It was painful, but manageable, the flesh cauterized by the weapon's heat. The lift slowed as it approached the upper levels, and Jack positioned himself beside the door, rifle ready. When they opened, he was greeted not by a security team, but by a vast, open chamber dominated by a towering structure of crystalline spires and pulsing energy conduits. At the center stood what could only be the relay tower, a column of light stretching from floor to ceiling, surrounded by control consoles and monitoring stations. A skeleton crew of technicians worked at the stations, their attention focused on the complex energy patterns flowing through the tower. None of them were armed security personnel. These were scientists and engineers, not warriors. Jack assessed the situation quickly. The dimensional fold apparatus was clearly active, with countdown displays showing less than 40 minutes remaining before the Omega Protocol completed its initialization sequence. Once fully charged, the fold would target Earth's coordinates in space-time, removing it from the universal matrix. He needed to disable the system without destroying the entire station, a precision operation requiring technical knowledge he didn't possess. But Jack had always been adaptable, learning what he needed in the field. Moving swiftly but quietly along the chamber's perimeter, he approached the nearest technician, a small, multi-limbed being absorbed in monitoring energy fluctuations. With practiced efficiency, Jack immobilized the alien with a sleeper hold, careful to apply pressure appropriate to its physiology. As the technician slumped unconscious, Jack took its place at the console, studying the alien interface. The symbols were unintelligible, but the visual representations of energy flow were clear enough. Power was being channeled from the station's core reactor into the dimensional fold apparatus, building toward critical mass. Interrupting that flow would trigger safeguards and alerts. He needed a more subtle approach, something that would corrupt the process without immediately signaling sabotage. Jack's attention fixed on what appeared to be targeting coordinates, a complex string of symbols representing Earth's position in the universal matrix. If he could alter those coordinates, redirect the fold to an empty sector of space. A voice spoke behind him in accented English. Your persistence is remarkable, human, futile, but remarkable. Jack turned to find General Horvath standing 10 meters away, flanked by 4 elite Zarn guards. The general's exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights, adorned with what were clearly military insignia and battle decorations. I was beginning to think you were avoiding me, General, Jack replied, slowly rising from the console, hands visible but ready to move. Horvath's translator rendered his guttural laugh with mechanical precision. You've caused considerable disruption to this facility. Commander Briggs, damaged infrastructure, injured personnel, compromised security protocols. You've only succeeded in confirming my assessment of your species. Glad to be helpful, Jack said, eyes flicking between the general and his guards, calculating distances and angles. Though I think you've misunderstood something fundamental about humans. And what might that be? Horvath asked, his upper limbs adjusting what was unmistakably a weapon. We don't take kindly to cosmic bullies deciding our fate without our input. Jack's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. Earth might be messy and chaotic and imperfect, but it's ours. We've fought gods and monsters and each other for thousands of years, and we're still standing. Horvath's compound eyes gleamed with what might have been amusement. Not for much longer. The dimensional fold has passed the critical initialization threshold. It cannot be stopped now, only redirected, as you were attempting to do. He gestured to the console behind Jack. An admirable effort, but the targeting parameters are quantum-locked once the sequence begins. Jack didn't allow his expression to change, though internally he reassessed his options. If he couldn't redirect the fold, he would have to disable it entirely, even if that meant more drastic measures. Your species remains a fascinating study in contradiction, Horvath continued. Such capacity for violence, yet such loyalty to abstract concepts like home and duty. The neural probe extracted fragments of your military oath before you destroyed it. Support and defend, wasn't it? Against all enemies. That's right, Jack acknowledged. And right now, from where I'm standing, you qualify. The general's upper limbs flexed in what might have been anticipation. You've proven yourself a worthy adversary, Commander. I will ensure your species' entry in the Galactic Archives acknowledges your individual capabilities before Earth is consigned to non-existence. That's thoughtful of you, Jack replied. I've got a counteroffer, though. Oh? You call off this Omega protocol, and I don't have to show you what happens when you back a human into a corner with everything he cares about on the line. Horvath's translator couldn't quite capture the nuance of his response, but the dismissive gesture was universal. Your bravado is misplaced. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and the countdown cannot be aborted. In approximately 37 minutes, Earth will cease to exist in all timelines and dimensional branches. Jack's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. Then I've got nothing to lose, do I? The standoff was interrupted by the chamber doors sliding open. Dr. Click entered, accompanied by Senator Glarian and several other council representatives. Their arrival momentarily distracted Horvath and his guards, the opening Jack had been waiting for. In one fluid motion, he drew his sidearm and fired 3 rapid shots, not at Horvath or his guards, but at the primary power conduit feeding the relay tower. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Energy surged through the system as safeguards failed, creating a cascade of overloads throughout the chamber. Control consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the crystalline structure of the relay tower began to fracture under the strain. Horvath roared in fury, firing his weapon at Jack, who had already dived behind a support column. The energy blast scorched the metal where he had stood a moment earlier. The chamber descended into chaos, Technicians fled as systems failed, emergency protocols activated, and the relay tower's energy patterns became increasingly unstable. Warning klaxons blared throughout the station as the dimensional fold apparatus began to tear itself apart. Jack emerged from cover, firing precise shots that disabled two of Horvath's guards. The other two returned fire, forcing him to retreat behind a damaged console. "The entire relay system is collapsing!" Click shouted, over the cacophony of alarms and energy discharges. "The fold can't complete without stable parameter control." Horvath charged toward Jack's position, all pretense of civilized discourse abandoned. The general's massive form crashed into the console, sending Jack sprawling across the chamber floor. His rifle skittered away, out of reach. Jack rolled to his feet, drawing his combat knife as Horvath bore down on him. The Zarn's superior size and strength were evident as they collided. But Jack had spent his entire career fighting larger, stronger opponents. He ducked beneath Horvath's first sweeping strike, using the alien's momentum against him. The knife found a gap in the exoskeleton at a joint articulation, and green ichor sprayed as the blade bit deep. Horvath howled, a sound that needed no translation. One of his lower limbs struck Jack squarely in the chest, sending him crashing into the base of the relay tower. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, pain lancing through his ribcage, where at least one bone had fractured. The general advanced, wounded, but far from defeated. "Your resistance is impressive, human," he said, voice distorted by rage and pain. "But ultimately meaningless." Jack struggled to his feet, knife still clutched in his hand. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, partially obscuring his vision. The relay tower behind him was disintegrating, shards of crystal raining down as energy arced unpredictably throughout the chamber. "That's where you're wrong," Jack replied, voice steady despite his injuries. "It's never meaningless to fight for your home." As Horvath lunged forward, Jack sidestepped with the precision of thousands of hours of close-quarters combat training. The knife flashed once, twice, finding the vulnerable connections between armored plates. Horvath stumbled, green fluid pumping from multiple wounds. The general turned, slower now, his fury undiminished. "Even if you stop the fold, human, the Council will simply rebuild. Earth remains a threat that must be eliminated." Jack didn't waste breath responding. He kicked a fallen piece of equipment into Horvath's path, momentarily disrupting the alien's balance. In that instant of vulnerability, Jack struck, not with a knife, but with an open-handed strike to a neural cluster near the base of Horvath's neck. A weakness he had observed during their combat. The effect was immediate. Horvath froze, his exoskeleton locked in paralysis, as neural signals failed to transmit properly. He toppled sideways, crashing to the floor in a heap of immobilized limbs. Jack stood over the fallen general, breathing heavily, knife still ready. "That's the problem with you cosmic types," he said, between labored breaths. "You underestimate what we can do when we have to." The relay tower gave a final, catastrophic surge as its containment systems failed completely. The column of light at its center pulsed erratically, then collapsed inward with a sound like reality itself, tearing at the seams. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Jack found himself standing in the eye of an impossible storm, surrounded by fragments of crystalline technology suspended in midair, energy patterns frozen in complex configurations. Then, the moment passed, and the relay tower imploded with a thunderous crack that shook the entire station. The dimensional fold apparatus, and the Omega protocol it controlled, collapsed into itself, leaving behind a smoking crater where the tower had stood. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the distant wail of emergency systems and the settling of debris. Jack remained standing, bloodied but unbowed, as council representatives and the few remaining technicians stared in disbelief. Senator Glarian was the first to speak. "The dimensional fold has been Neutralized. Earth remains intact within the universal matrix. Jack lowered his knife, surveying the destruction he had wrought. Not just the relay tower, but the very foundation of the Council's authority had been shaken. A single human had fought his way through their security, disabled their most powerful weapon, and demonstrated that Earth would not go quietly into non-existence. "Consider this a diplomatic message," Jack said, addressing the assembled Council representatives. "Earth isn't looking for trouble with your galactic whatever, but we won't be erased without one hell of a fight." Click approached cautiously, those large eyes taking in Jack's injuries. "What happens now, Commander?" Jack looked around at the representatives. The fallen general, the destroyed relay tower. In less than 72 hours, he had upended interstellar politics and prevented his planet's annihilation. Not bad for a guy who'd started the week on a routine training exercise in the Arctic. "Now," he said, wincing slightly as he sheathed his knife, "we negotiate." The emergency council session convened 12 hours after the destruction of the relay tower. Jack sat at a previously unthinkable position, a seat at the council table itself, flanked by Dr. Click and Senator Glarian. His injuries had been treated with advanced medical technology that had mended his fractured ribs and other wounds with remarkable efficiency. Across the table, General Horvath was notably absent. In his place sat a different Zarn representative, one who regarded Jack with cautious respect rather than open hostility. High Counselor Vex presided over the session, their sensory appendages moving in patterns that conveyed both agitation and curiosity. This emergency session of the Galactic Council will now address the status of Earth following recent events. The diplomatic understatement drew murmurs from the assembled representatives. "Let the record show that the Omega Protocol initiated against the planet designated Earth has been terminated due to critical system failure," Vex continued. "The dimensional fold apparatus will require approximately 7 standard cycles to rebuild." Jack remained silent, his posture relaxed but alert. He had traded his blood-stained combat gear for a clean uniform provided by the Council, a diplomatic courtesy that acknowledged his de facto status as Earth's representative. "In light of these developments," Vex said, "and the capabilities demonstrated by Commander Briggs, the Council must reassess Earth's designation within the galactic community." Senator Glarian's luminous form pulsed with what Jack had come to recognize as enthusiasm. "I propose immediate reclassification to protected observation status, with potential for limited contact protocols within the next 2 decades. "Observation is insufficient," countered the new Zarn representative. "The human has demonstrated their species possesses traits that could be valuable to the Council. A controlled integration program. Earth is not ready for full disclosure of galactic civilization." Click interrupted, surprising Jack with this assertive stance. "The cultural shock would be devastating to their societal structures. My xenopsychological assessment strongly recommends a gradual approach." Jack listened to the aliens debate his planet's fate with a mixture of amusement and concern. They were still discussing Earth as an object to be categorized and managed rather than a world with its own agency. But at least annihilation was off the table. When there was a pause in the discussion, Jack cleared his throat, all attention immediately focused on him. "I appreciate the various proposals," he said, voice calm, but carrying unmistakable authority. "But there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding here. Earth isn't applying for membership in your council. We didn't ask to be discovered, categorized, or managed." He leaned forward slightly. "What I'm proposing is simpler. You leave us alone to develop at our own pace. No interference, no abductions, no judgments based on partial information. In return, we won't have to demonstrate again what happens when you threaten our existence." Vex's appendages quivered with what might have been indignation. "You speak as if your single act of sabotage represents your species' capabilities. The Council oversees thousands of worlds with technologies far beyond Earth's current development." Jack smiled slightly. With respect, High Counselor, you're making the same mistake General Horvath made. You think I'm something special, some outlier that doesn't represent humanity's true capabilities. The fact is, I'm just one example of what humans do when our backs are against the wall. He gestured toward the viewing port, where the violet gas giant rotated slowly beyond the station. There are billions more like me on Earth. Different skills, different strengths, but the same fundamental trait. We don't accept boundaries easily, especially ones imposed by others. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed his words. "What precisely are you proposing, Commander Briggs?" Senator Glarian asked finally. "A simple agreement," Jack replied. "Earth remains untouched and uncontacted until we develop interstellar capabilities on our own. No interference, no uplift protocols, no judgment from afar. When we're ready to join the galactic community, we'll do it on our own terms." The Zarn representative's compound eyes gleamed with skepticism. "And what guarantees would the Council have that humans won't become the threat General Horvath feared? Your species' capacity for violence has been amply demonstrated." Jack nodded acknowledgement. "Fair question. How about this? Dr. Click and a small research team continue studying Earth from a distance. No abductions, no direct interference, just observation. They can report to the Council on our progress and warn you if we start heading in a truly dangerous direction." He turned to Click. "The Doctor has shown a genuine interest in understanding humanity rather than simply categorizing us. I trust their assessment to be fair." Click's skin rippled with what appeared to be a complex mix of surprise and pride. "I would be honored to continue this research assignment." High Counselor Vex conferred quietly with several other representatives before responding. "Your proposal has merit, Commander, though many details would need to be established. The Council has never entered into such an arrangement with a pre-interstellar civilization." "First time for everything," Jack replied with a slight smile. "Consider it a new approach to galactic diplomacy." The discussion continued for hours, delving into specifics about monitoring protocols, non-interference boundaries, and contingency plans. Throughout it all, Jack maintained his position. Earth would be left to develop on its own path, free from external manipulation or judgment. Finally, as the session drew to a close, Vex made the formal declaration. "By consensus of the Galactic Council, Earth is hereby designated a sovereign development zone, exempt from standard contact protocols until such time as it achieves independent interstellar capability. Dr. Click will lead a passive observation team to monitor progress and report findings on a biannual basis." The declaration was recorded in the Council's archives, marking an unprecedented shift in galactic policy, one forced by a single human's refusal to accept his planet's predetermined fate. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Click approached Jack. "You've achieved something remarkable, Commander. No other species has ever negotiated terms with the Council before formal contact was established." Jack shrugged slightly. "I just did what needed doing, Doctor. The question now is how I get back to Earth." "That presents certain challenges," Click admitted. "The probability wormhole that brought you here was a random phenomenon, difficult to replicate precisely. However, with the Council's resources, we should be able to return you to approximately the same temporal and spatial coordinates from which you were taken." "Approximately," Jack raised an eyebrow. "Within a few kilometers and perhaps a day or two of your abduction point," Click clarified. "The accuracy improves significantly if we can use your own neural patterns to guide the translocation." Jack nodded. "And what will I remember of all this?" Click's skin darkened slightly. "That is a complex question. The Council would prefer to implement memory suppression protocols to prevent premature disclosure of galactic civilization to Earth." "Not happening," Jack said firmly. "My memories stay intact. I anticipated your response. Click replied, with what might have been a smile. I've proposed an alternative. You retain your memories, but agree to certain disclosure limitations until Earth reaches the appropriate technological threshold. A compromise that protects both your autonomy and the Council's concerns about premature contact. Jack considered this. I can live with that. Not like anyone would believe me anyway. As they walked toward the preparation area where the return translocation would be initiated, Jack found himself reflecting on the extraordinary events of the past few days. He had been abducted across hundreds of light years, killed an alien warrior, survived interrogation, escaped imprisonment, destroyed a reality-altering weapon, and negotiated his planet's autonomy with a galactic governing body. All in a week's work for a Navy SEAL, he supposed. There is one more thing, Commander, Click said as they reached the translocation chamber. The Council has authorized me to offer you a position as a liaison between my observation team and Earth. Your insights would be invaluable to my research, and you would have access to certain advantages. Jack smiled but shook his head. Appreciate the offer, Doctor, but my place is back home. Earth needs defenders who understand what's out there, even if they can't talk about it openly yet. Click's large eyes studied him with what seemed like genuine affection. You are a remarkable example of your species, Jack Briggs. It has been my privilege to study you. Likewise, Doctor. You're not so bad yourself for a blue alien who helped abduct me. Jack extended his hand in the human gesture of farewell. After a moment's hesitation, Click's slender fingers wrapped around Jack's in a careful handshake. Until we meet again, Commander. Earth's future holds great promise and great challenge. Story of our species, Jack replied with a grin. We wouldn't have it any other way. The translocation chamber hummed with energy as Jack stepped onto the platform. He took one last look at the alien technology, the viewing port showing the violet gas giant, and Dr. Click standing with those impossibly large eyes fixed on him. As the energy field enveloped him, Jack Briggs, Navy SEAL, accidental diplomat, and unwitting savior of Earth, offered a crisp military salute to the xenopsychologist who had become an unlikely ally. Then reality shifted, twisted, and reconstructed itself around him. The Arctic wind bit at his face as he found himself standing exactly where he had been when the wormhole had taken him, on the edge of a frozen training ground. His team nowhere in sight. His radio crackled to life. Iron Jaw, this is base. Where the hell have you been? You've been off-grid for 36 hours. Jack smiled to himself as he keyed the response. Just taking the scenic route. Base. Coming home now. Above him, the stars twinkled in the clear Arctic sky. Countless worlds orbiting countless suns. Some harboring life and civilization beyond human imagination. And somewhere out there, a blue-skinned xenopsychologist with oversized eyes was watching, studying, and perhaps even admiring the species that had produced Jack Ironjaw Briggs. Earth remained on the universal map, unaware of how close it had come to erasure, and how one man's refusal to surrender had changed the course of cosmic history. As Jack trudged through the snow toward the distant lights of the base, he found himself smiling at the thought of the report he wouldn't be able to file, the debriefing that would never happen, and the story that would remain untold until humanity was ready to hear it. Some mysteries were better left unexplained, for now.